Welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of Call the Doctor with Dr. Bob Gill and myself, Chris Williamson. It's a regular weekly Workers' Party programme looking at all things NHS. And this evening, we trailed it on the social media advertising tonight's programme, various things that we wanted to look at, this big takeover of the private Spire hospitals, emergency practitioners being trained in, I think it's less than 3 weeks, isn't it, Bob? And also the effectiveness of these obesity jabs that Wes Streeting was advocating. And indeed, I believe that trial has already started. And if anybody's got any questions, by the way, any of our listeners want to make a point or ask Bob a question, just raise your hand and we'll bring you in. Alternatively, if you simply just want to let your feelings be known by way of a note, a message, we'll pick those up and I can read those out on air as well. But first of all, Bob, I just wanted to start with Andy Burnham, if we may, because he's been in the news, hasn't he, over the weekend? The Mayor of Greater Manchester, who was the former health minister in the Labour government under Gordon Brown, and left Parliament a few years back to stand for the mayor in Manchester. I mean, I always got on with Andy, I've got to say. I mean, I found him a very personable individual. I won't say we're necessarily mates, but, you know, he was one of the better MPs when I was in there. But his record on, I mean, given that he might be, I know the Labour National Executive Committee have ruled him out for now, standing in that by-election in the Denton, was it Gorton and Denton, is it? I think the name of the constituency. But whether or not that will change, I mean, who knows? But obviously it is something I think that we do need to consider, the possibility of his return to Parliament, because a lot of people have been saying, haven't they, for some time now, that if only we had Andy Burnham, the Labour Party's fortunes would be considerably improved. And you know, he's seen as the prince across the water, as the great sort of white saviour, as it were. So I think it's worth just exploring, you know, his record, because, you know, he was one of the new Labour aficionados, you know, very much in the sort of Blair, Gordon Brown era. And his record in terms of being the health secretary with regard to privatisation, indeed, I think it was the Conservative Home, the online Conservative Party website, that news website, talked about Andy Burnham, I think, paving the way for privatisation. So, Bob, I mean, you've obviously been campaigning against the privatisation, the destruction of our National Health Service for some time. Your film, The Great NHS Heist, which I always want to give a plug to because it's a crucially important seminal film that everybody should watch if they're interested in the National Health Service and what, you know, we could potentially lose and you know, the pressures that it's now facing and the moves to actually destroy it. And so I think you will probably have a view on Andy Burnham, which I'm sure our listeners would be keen to hear. So just give us your assessment, will you, Bob, of Andy's record as the health secretary going in that period when he was under Gordon Brown.
Yeah, so you mentioned there he might be a better choice for Labour's prospects, but I don't think the prospects for my patients would be any different under Burnham than they are with Starmer. You're right, he spent several years as the health secretary. He was the health secretary just before Labour were booted out of office. And during his stay, I suppose most notably is he never challenged the privatization agenda. He went along with everything that had preceded him. He didn't say boo to a goose regarding private finance initiative. He's commented on by Conservative Home for being a pioneer as the first Secretary of State for Health to outsource the running of a whole hospital. And this was the Hitchingbrook Hospital. And the article you referred to from 2012, I believe it was, were hailing this as a major step forward to facilitate the privatization. But that particular escapade ended in total disaster. The commercial entity, I think it was a Circle Group, headed up by a gentleman known as Ali Parser, who can talk a good game, but actually, if you've got a couple of brain cells, he sounds like a snake oil salesman. And indeed, he had plenty of positive publicity at the beginning, but he left a trust where he was slashing terms and conditions of staff, trying to run it with inadequate staff numbers, and surprise, surprise, patients paid a very heavy price. And it was Andy Burnham who allowed this travesty to take place. And in his later years, I believe in 2009, Burnham commissioned the management consultants McKinsey's, who I've mentioned several times when we've had these discussions, who have been sniffing around the NHS since the 1970s, believe it or not. And if you really analyze who's writing the policies for these consecutive governments, Labour, Tory, doesn't really matter when it comes to the NHS, it's McKinsey. And he commissioned McKinsey to write a report in 2009 called the QUIP report, Quality, Innovation, Productivity and Prevention. Lovely title. But what this was a series of PowerPoints which essentially said we can run the NHS with fewer doctors and fewer qualified staff. And this was Andy Burnham's parting gift to the NHS. And this dovetails into what we've discussed many times, which is the downskilling agenda. So this is deeply troubling if you're interested in good outcomes for yourself and your relatives. If you want them to survive their trip to hospital, you want qualified staff there. You don't want people who've had hardly any training, who've come from another walk of life, and within weeks they're on the front line looking after patients. This is a recipe for disaster, and it's been a proven disaster. Yet they continue with this escapade because it will ultimately deliver more profits for private companies as they take control over our hospital stock and become responsible for the terms and conditions of all the staff.
Yes, no, absolutely. Well, we'll come on to that explicit point about really kind of underqualified staff dealing with emergency situations, people coming into A&E and whatever, in need of expert treatment in a little bit later on in the show. But I just wanted to get your thoughts as well, and whether or not we could suggest that maybe Andy Burnham's any responsibility for, or had a sort of his period in office had an impact on the private healthcare sector across the piece. And of course, there's this thing which is in the news at the moment, isn't it, about some private equity company, a big buyout of 1.5 billion, apparently takeover of private hospitals, the 40, I think it is, of the biggest private hospitals in the country. And there's about 200 or so, isn't there, private hospitals across the country? So we're talking 20% of the total and 40 of the biggest hospitals. What's all that about? I mean, is it something we should be concerned about, in your opinion, Bob?
Yeah, I think if we understand what private equity is, this is where the rich, the millionaire and billionaire class invest their money, and what they want to see is maximum return for their investment without any effort. That's what private equity is all about. And we've seen the effect of private equity in retail. For example, private equity will buy out a big retail concern like Woolworths or some of the clothing chains that were sold to private equity. And what they do is hollow out the institution. They sell off the real estate assets. They then lease them back. They saddle the organization with huge amounts of debt. They raid the pension pot, and then they leave a failing wreck behind, and they're untouchable. Now, that's the track record of private equity. Now, if we want these people anywhere near healthcare, we need our heads examining. But there is no barrier to their entry into healthcare. Now, this bid to take over Spire, which is a big concern, as you said, 40 hospitals. Private equity can see that the government wants more and more activity delivered by the private sector, be that through the horrendous treatment of people languishing on waiting lists and choosing to pay out of pocket and going to the private sector, or be it through direct funding through public funds, which is now generating around 30% of Spire's income. They don't mind the route of which this money comes through, but shareholders want, again, they want maximum dividend payout. The chief executives want great bonuses, and they don't mind that the ways of working of private equity are to asset strip and hollow out. As long as they're interested in the short-term gain, and they're not interested in the wreckage left behind. So the move of private equity into UK healthcare will follow the same predictable lines as we've seen in America, where they've taken over nursing homes, where they've taken over hospitals, and what they do is destroy the competition and then eat away at service provision and quality. And that's what this opens the door to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Andy Burnham, does he have any kind of legacy of Andy's period in office? Does that have any relevance to this particular takeover, in your opinion, or is it unrelated in that sense?
No, he's got history as the mayor of Manchester. So, one of the reorganizations meant replacing strategic health authorities with new pro-privatization, supposedly public bodies, statutory bodies. And these were the front for major reorganizations. And what reorganization means to me and you is cuts and closures. And Andy Burnham, as mayor of Manchester, rubber stamped all the closures and reconfigurations that went on in Manchester and in and around Manchester. So he is fully on board with his most recent track record in public office. He offers no help. People are still deluding themselves that Labour is somehow different in a major way to the Conservative Party. The Labour establishment will never let somebody like Jeremy Corbyn or somebody like yourself, who's genuinely interested in redistribution and looking after the working class, they will never let that person anywhere near the levers of power. And they will do everything they can in their power to destroy, through smear, through sabotage, through infiltration, any mechanism possible they will use to make sure that doesn't happen. So Andy Burnham is a safe pair of hands. The public naturally assume, they have short memories. They don't really understand what he's done in office. They've forgotten what he did as health secretary. He may be a better performer on camera, but that makes no difference to the policy outcomes. And expect no different from Mr. Burnham.
No, indeed. That's interesting. You say that, and obviously you make the point that the Labour establishment, as we discovered, didn't want anybody like Jeremy Corbyn, or indeed myself, or anybody in that mindset who was genuinely supportive of redistribution and basically the creation of a good society, and making sure that the public services were exclusively dedicated to delivering public service, not private profit, in a range of other policy areas. But Andy Burnham, though, comes from the new Labour stable, and yet apparently the National Executive Committee have prevented him from putting his hat in the ring for this by-election in Greater Manchester, in the Denton and Gorton, I think it's called, constituency. Why do you think that is? Is that because he's seen as a threat to Sir Keir Starmer, and because, from what you're saying, I mean, and his track records would seem to indicate that it would be pretty much business as usual in terms of the policy agenda going forward? And indeed, I think in his application to the National Executive Committee to be considered, he actually made that point, although he may have felt that was the important thing to say to have any chance of being allowed to stand. But what's your thoughts then as to why he's been prevented then? Because, as I say, he's very much going to be, Mr. Continuity New Labour, wouldn't he be, if he were to be elected and then elected in the by-election? That's a big if, of course, because I think the Workers' Party are going to be fielding a candidate there, and I think we would be with a reasonable chance of success there. But just give us your thoughts, Bob, in that sense, why he's been prevented from standing so far.
Yeah, I think electorally he may be a better option for the Labour Party, but it's power dynamics and it's self-preservation of the NEC itself. This committee that decides who will go forward, they unfortunately have a relatively low opinion of most of these politicians in positions of power. What is the overriding driving motivation is self-preservation and self-interest. And if they think their own careers are temporarily safer with Starmer, they will go that way. They might have calculated that we will not enable Starmer's demise, but will be quite happy to flourish under Starmer's successor. So for now, we'll be seen to go along with Starmer and scupper Burnham's ambitions, but they know they're playing the long game. And these people, I suspect, are secure enough in their seats to not really care about what the outcome of the next election might be, because they'll be still in office. So it's a very selfish stance. And as I said, they're not really doing anything in favor or against the public interest by supporting Burnham's candidacy. It will make no difference to us.
Yeah. And just a quick sort of reminder to anybody who's listening in, if you want to put a point to Bob or ask a question, then just put your hand up and we'll bring you in. Somebody's commented, Bob, in the comment section there. It's Rocks Attack 25 is the name given. He says, I saw Burnham quietly exit, so he didn't have to stand up to the Zionist lobby. He reminds me of the caricature of Bastard. If you remember that program on the TV a few years back now, and he goes on to say also, he says, my daughter has lupus, and we've had to use the NHS for decades on a regular basis, as she has kidney and heart affected by that, and heart attacks with. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. He said, my heart breaks. I beg your pardon. My heart breaks with every visit in shiny new hospitals, but no staff. The care element had been squeezed out like it's a war zone. Whenever we sent to A&E, that whenever we go to A&E, I think he means these days. I mean, that kind of chimes really with what you've been saying, isn't it, Bob? I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So these shiny, gleaming hospitals, it doesn't matter to the PFI contract holders whether they're busy or they're not busy, or whether they function or they deliver what they should, because they're getting their interest payments guaranteed. They're hooked into these 20, 30, 40-year contracts, which are going to deliver them handsome profits in terms of interest rate. So they don't care about the service being provided. And that is the problem. That is that misallocation of funding. That is how the NHS has been carved up into a cash cow, be it for financiers, be it for private hospital concerns, be it for the drug companies. The patient is bottom of the list when it comes to organising healthcare in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick check with our Chris in our gallery. Has anybody indicated they want to speak, Chris? At the moment?
Not at the moment, Chris.
Okay, no worries. Let's move on then, Bob, if we can, to this curious advertisement that I saw from the Imperial College Healthcare. It says, we're recruiting a trainee emergency practitioner to join our urgent treatment centre. In this training role, you'll develop the skills to assess, treat and manage patients independently across the UTC and emergency department. You'll grow across all 4 pillars of advanced practice with structured support throughout your journey. To qualify as an emergency practitioner, you'll complete a 3-week training program, 150 hours of supervised clinical practice, a professional portfolio, and level 7 academic and clinical assessments. Once successfully completed, you'll progress into an emergency practitioner role, delivering high quality, autonomous care for our patients. If you're motivated to develop your expertise and build a rewarding career in emergency care, we'd love to hear from you. Apply now. Then it gives the link to apply. What do you make of that, Bob? I mean, that seems to be yet further dumbing down. I know we've talked about these. What do they call them, Bob? These GP assistants. Is it what's the term that you call them? With the
physician's assistants.
Physician's assistants. Yeah. With a 2-year, I think, is it training program? I mean, this is 3 weeks, Bob. I mean, good Lord. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, it's getting from bad to worse. The physician's assistants or associates, the names keep changing. They do what they call medical studies for 2 years. There's a 100% pass rate, and then they're put on the front line as equivalent to GPs who have done 5 years of undergraduate study, 5 years of supervised training, and on-the-job learning before they're let loose on their own. So the standards have been decimated. The regulatory bodies are turning a blind eye. The people running the trust clearly don't care. And remember, this links back to Burnham because he commissioned the report from McKinsey to say this is a great idea. So they cannot protest. And that's the beauty of this two-party setup, is they will never expose the lies of the previous administration because they all agree. No, so we're none the wiser if you listen to the BBC and mainstream media as to what's actually going on.
Yeah.
So 3 weeks then on the job learning is dangerous. It's a disaster because in order to understand, have an idea of what might be wrong with the patient, you need a very small blind spot, an awareness that there is something that I may not know, and have the confidence to know and experience to know, well, this is outside of my competence. This is outside of my experience.
Yeah.
The less and less trained people you put forward, they're going to be suffering with this, what is called a Dunning-Kruger syndrome, whereby your lack of knowledge is matched by your abundance of confidence.
Yeah.
Right? And it is extremely dangerous for the people. Now, what will happen in due course is there will be very few experienced eyes left in the department. So when things go seriously wrong, what will be well, first of all, the staff won't even spot that there's been an error. So that helps. And if they do, because they don't have the knowledge to know we should have done things differently, so they may be genuinely unaware that this was a disaster that could have been prevented.
Yeah.
And if they weren't aware, well, there's not the supervision or experience around to know that actually this disaster could have been prevented. Even if this got through to somebody who potentially could raise the alarm, well, there's now a huge incentive in the department to cover it up because they've employed these unskilled or less skilled, less qualified people. This is department policy. Why would they dare shine the light on what their policy has predictably and inevitably led to? Why would they do that? So there will be a culture of cover up, and this will be from top down, and you'll go through a charade of a reporting system and it will go nowhere. And they will try very hard to make sure that the relatives, if they do smell a rat, they're fed a whole series of lies and cover up. And we saw an example of this during the last Tory government, where a doctor sent a handwritten note to relatives of a patient who died saying his death was preventable. And this was a hospital trust where Matt Hancock was MP, and he employed experts in handwriting to try and identify who this doctor was so action could be taken against the doctor.
Yeah, shooting the messenger, really. Yeah.
This is the culture. Now, you know how dirty parliamentary politics is. You know you have to toe the line and how they can discipline you and destroy you if you don't toe the line. That exact culture is throughout public service.
Yeah.
So good people are crushed and silenced, and the the public aren't protected. That is
Mm,
life. But it wasn't
mm.
always like this, but it
No,
is now.
no, it's a tragedy and a travesty. But I guess they might argue that these emergency practitioners, if we're looking at it in terms of productivity, we can train these people up in 3 weeks rather than 5, 6, 10 years to train a medical, properly qualified medical practitioner, and somehow that is going to getting value for money. They'll probably try to argue, but of course they're not taking account of all the points that you made. I think we've got
Well,
a
the other
oh,
thing on
sorry.
that, in terms
Yeah,
of, I think it's an important point, productivity
yeah,
is utterly false. We've already got unemployed doctors who the public have trained up at a cost of £200,000 or £300,000, languishing perhaps on benefits.
yes.
If you're dealt with by an experienced person early on, then you don't get the complications.
No, of course
So
not.
you're only leading to productivity if you kill the patient.
Yes.
That's extremely productive because
Yeah. Yeah.
the healthcare cost goes to zero immediately, right?
Mm, mm, mm.
So, and we know that the amount of patients returning to the A&E department is going up as you downskill the staff. So you're not saving any money. This is
No.
more costly. This
Yeah.
is about removing expertise and witnesses to the unfolding tragedy across the country. That's what's going on here. They
Mm,
don't want accountability, and they don't want anybody to flag up what's going
mm.
on.
Just before we show this quick film that kind of illustrates some of the points that we've just been talking about, Bob, I mean, what would you advise listeners, viewers to do about this? I mean, to maybe at least lobby their MP as a minimum, I suppose, to sort of express their horror at the direction of travel that the government's taken in this regard, or is there anything else they should be doing?
Well, so if I know a patient of mine is going to A&E, I first of all say, look, take a responsible adult you trust with you. Ask to see a doctor before you're discharged home.
Yes.
Those are two basic things. That it's this premature discharge without considering all the possibilities
Yeah.
that is leading to people representing later on when they're in a sicker condition, or
Mm.
maybe not making it, right?
No, no,
So
indeed.
I've had personal experience. I've lost count of the number of people who've been misdiagnosed and sent home prematurely, only to bounce back in even sicker than they were
Mm,
originally, or
mm,
maybe not making it back in.
mm. I mean, that really reinforces your point about productivity there, Bob. But your personal experience there. They're very good, pertinent points to make. But Chris, can you show that video now?
I'm an elder millennial who just got my first hospital bill after my first time ever staying in the hospital. This is extortion. This is why everyone hates our medical system. $41,000. So I was in the hospital for less than 24 hours for high blood pressure. I had no surgery, no CAT scan, no MRI, nothing of that nature. My bill is absolutely ridiculous. The labs and chemistry, $10,000. $2,000 for labs. Blood culture, $4,400. And then, if you look at the back, it gets even worse. You have $12,000 for emergency room care. $1,000, $3,000 for these observation room visits. $800 each for physical therapy and PT. Like, this is insane. This is extortion in every single way. I don't know how people do this. This is my first time, and I'm shook.
Bob, is this where we're heading? I mean, that's quite astonishing, isn't it? What that case study there in about what happened to that individual. I mean, that's not untypical either, is it? Over in the States.
No, so what we heard was a chap who went to A&E with high blood pressure, left within 24 hours with a bill of $41,000. Now, what is going on here is clearly the hospital wants to maximize. They don't see you as a human or a patient. You are something to be fleeced, either directly through the patient or via their insurance company. And what ends up happening is they do lots of things that you don't need but generate an income. So they might put him on monitors that he didn't need, give him drugs he didn't need, perform scans that he didn't need. So potentially what ends up happening, actually, you could do more harm than actually leaving the patient alone, right? So that is how perverse privatized medicine can be. We have the systems now within our hospitals. There is a computer system called Epic, and this, surprise, surprise, has been imported from America. It's a system which is hated by the doctors in America because it requires a lot of data entry, including every single blood test you've had, every plaster that was applied, every time you had an alcohol swab applied, everything is itemized. Now, why would the UK import a system which is designed for itemization and billing if it wasn't that we were heading in this direction? So what the government have done by importing Epic, it has the IT system which is ideally placed for this fleecing and profiteering. The only difference is it will be the public purse that will be fleeced and profiteered if you end up getting any treatment. But increasingly, more and more people, the door will be closed in their face if, for example, they needed cataract surgery and they wanted both eyes done. The public purse might pay for one, and they'll have to pay out of pocket or get insurance to get the other one done. So the scope, the NHS no longer is going to be universal. It's going to be shrunken. There will be salami slicing away of services. For example, fertility services might not be available to a whole population within one of these new organizations called integrated care boards. That's the way we're going.
Yeah, I mean, and linking it back then to what we were just talking about, these emergency practitioners, I mean, and these physician assistants, have I got that correct, Bob? It seems that, I mean, if you're being cynical about it, that the dumbing down the professional staff who are responsible for providing care to reduce costs, with the ultimate aim somewhere down the track where obviously that makes it a much more attractive proposition for a privateer to come in. And I mean, and of course we've got, haven't we, Nigel Farage and Reform saying that they don't support the present system of funding the National Health Service and favour an insurance-based system, the sort of thing that, you know, this guy was just talking about in the States there. I mean, am I being overly cynical or not? I mean, what do you think about that, Bob?
No, I think you're spot on. Nigel Farage is quite happy for us to. He's more blatant about it. The Labour and Conservative Party are very reluctant to spell this out. At least you could say he's being honest. He's being more honest than the rest of them. That's the only credit I will give him. But he also claims to be a champion of working people. Well, getting charged $41,000 for less than 24-hour visit to A&E is not very friendly to the people of where he's the MP. I forget the name of the constituency, but they need to understand that a vote for Farage is like punching yourself in the face. Yeah. He represents the billionaire class. You know, he was in Davos just over the last week. He's not there to represent working class interests, right? This is the billionaire shindig where they're flying in from all over the world on their private jets, and he had all his expenses paid by a billionaire. Yet he has the charm to somehow persuade people that he's, you know, just a nice bloke down the pub. We need to shatter that illusion. And the sooner people wake up that, unfortunately, the arrangement of major political parties we have at the moment is a route to nowhere in terms of improvements of their own living conditions.
Yeah, no, indeed. I think it's Clacton, by the way, that Clacton that Farage is the MP for, and
where he's never to be found. By the way, he's never there.
No, indeed, yeah. I mean, it's when you say you give him credit for being honest, it's a bit like Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump. People say Donald Trump's terrible, which he is, of course, but he's just saying the quiet part out loud. I mean, all the previous, well, the vast majority anyway. I mean, maybe post JFK. Have pretty much all gone down that same track, haven't they? With the way in which they've handled the economy, and certainly since Clinton, which I think Tony Blair, New Labour, sort of modelled themselves on. He did so much damage to the welfare state, such as it was in the United States, and in terms of their foreign policy agenda, where he massively expanded NATO when Mikhail Gorbachev had been told by James Baker, given an absolute cast-iron guarantee that if he agreed to German reunification, they wouldn't expand 1 inch eastward. And then Clinton sort of broke that solemn pledge, and the rest is history. And we now seem to be hurtling toward the potentiality of a third world war, for God's sake. Let me just, before we move on to the next one, I just want to just double check with Chris whether anybody's got any comments or questions they want to put to Bob before we move on.
None at the moment, Chris.
Okay, mate. We'll move on then, Bob, if we can, then to the point which the video that Chris was just erroneously started to show about this obesity drug.
We found that people who took medication lost more weight compared with those who took part in a behavioural program, but the weight regain was much more rapid after medication compared with people who had taken part in behavioural programs. So after medication, people were estimated to return to their baseline weight after 1.7 years, whereas people who had finished a behavioural program weren't estimated to return to baseline until just under 4 years. As I said, the amount of weight lost is predictive of how fast people regain the weight. So we thought that perhaps this difference in weight regain could be explained by the fact that people just lost more weight by taking medication. So we did a further analysis where we broke down the amount of weight lost into averages of 5, 10, and 15 kilograms. And we found that, as I said before, more weight loss equals faster weight regain, but we saw consistently faster weight regain with medication, regardless of how much weight was lost.
Wes Streeting, back in the back end, I think, of 2024, talked about giving obese unemployed workers this obesity drug. Signed some sort of private deal with, I think it was an American pharmaceutical company. I can't remember the name of it actually, but it was a huge contract. It was like 270 odd million pounds, I believe. You may know the correct figure, Bob, but I mean, there's all sorts of problems, isn't there, with regard to this? I was looking at something in, I think it was The Guardian, relatively recently, saying that the effectiveness of this drug, whilst it may be that people have lost weight whilst taking the drug, when they come off the drug, they very quickly regain the weight. I don't know what the issues are with regard to side effects, but I mean, before we show this video, Bob, what's your overall view about Wes Streeting's, I'm going to say proposition, the implementation of Wes Streeting's idea about giving, it's almost kind of enforced medication to unemployed workers. It seems a bit sort of a dystopian to me. I don't know what you think, Bob.
Yeah, I think it's unethical. It's immoral what he was suggesting, which was either you take this shot to get into employment or you lose your benefits. I suspect there's an implied threat there. And it would appeal to maybe people who have a very superficial understanding, and it also sort of reinforces the undeserving sick narrative. That's the undercurrent here.
Yeah.
That people are lazy and feckless and don't want to work. But we have an obesity problem because of the food people are eating, and food that is designed to be addictive, and food that is cheap and plentiful and heavily advertised. So people, they're not actually making a choice, because the addictive nature of these, engineered, ultra-processed foods keeps you coming back. So it's a bit like a drug dealer. They get you hooked on the junk, which destroys your health. So he's putting all the onus on the individual. And why is he supporting this with public money? Well, who benefits? It's the big pharma companies and the pharmacy chains like Boots and Asda and all these other people. They're crowding out, even in pharmacy and drug distribution. They're crowding out the small independent pharmacists, and these big players are taking over. And this is a huge money spinner for the pharmacists. And the other aspect of this is, now this was a huge opportunity to take the doctor out of the equation.
Yeah.
So now you have equated the pharmacist to the level of the doctor, and it's assumed they'll have the same ethical framework and same caution. But my experience is none of that is true. So we've had people with a body mass index of 25 or 26 being offered these jabs. As long as they pay, they will get the jab. There's not much monitoring. God knows how much counseling there is in terms of side effects. I doubt it very much that they go into the side effects. And
Yeah.
there are some quite worrying side effects. So they might not be very common, but there is a risk of sudden blindness with these jabs. There's a risk of permanent gastric paralysis, so your stomach stops contracting. There's a risk of permanent loss of appetite. A more common side effect is a risk of pancreatitis, which is a life-threatening inflammation of your pancreas.
Wow.
So people have a perception that this is a risk-free drug and all the celebrities are doing it. But the chickens are slowly coming home to roost as the lawsuits start to mount in America.
Mm.
And West Streeting wanted a bit of public credibility. Oh, look, the NHS is going to fund this.
Yeah.
But behind it lies the ability for major corporations to profiteer. And he's allowing pharmacists who don't have the same level of due diligence, pharmacy chains who are employing unqualified people to dole out these injections. So it's a repetition of what we're seeing in A&E departments, the downskilling, the lack of broad knowledge and awareness. Now, if I'm going to give a drug to my patient, I have a few things that make me a bit cautious. First of all, I've seen these wonder drugs come and go over a 30-year career. We only find out the downside several years later, so there's always a lag. Secondly, people who think that a drug will wondrously improve their health are extremely naive. And what we see with the people who are looking for an easy way out, their diets are atrocious, their lifestyle is atrocious. So you take a drug that knocks off your appetite for a while, but you're still eating junk food, right? So your risk of diabetes and chronic disease remains the same, might be slightly reduced because you've lost the weight, but unless your diet and lifestyle improve, this is only a temporary fix. Yeah. So it would have been much better had they funded these jabs in well-run clinics with experienced staff who are very selective about people who get them, making sure that people who are committed to a lifestyle change get them, and they are properly monitored. Now, the other reason stopping me dishing these out is I'm conscious that if there's a side effect, these are still my patients. I have to deal with them when they come back with their blindness or other problems, right? And can I hand on heart say that I did this in their best interest? So I will apply a greater degree of caution before I just prescribe.
Yeah.
But that is not the same with a pharmacy, which you don't have a long-term relationship with. And pharmacies have a huge conflict of interest because they will recommend a drug that they then go on to profit from. And West Streeting doesn't care about conflict of interest, doesn't care about good use of public money, and doesn't care, in fact, is actively eroding the place of a doctor and a GP as an essential part of good, safe community healthcare.
And it's a typical neoliberal response as well, isn't it, Bob, where they're kind of individualizing the, people's difficulties. I mean, I was watching a documentary, I don't know, a few weeks back now, looking at how obesity has really increased substantially, particularly amongst working class communities. And they compared it with the same kind of cohorts within the same strata within society from 30, 40, 50 years ago. We didn't have an obesity. I mean, obviously some people that were obese, but we didn't have an obesity crisis in the way in which we have today. And then they put things down to there were differences in terms of people's working patterns and stuff like that, and so certainly that has played a part the role of new technology and how that's led to a more sedentary sort of work life situation for lots of people. But of course, so you have that technological impact, but also the point I think you make, Bob, about the food industry, where they are really basically, as you say, making people become addicted to this cheap shit food. When you've got very little money, I mean, this government, is continuing to bear down on social security for people. Many people are in work as well, are on very kind of like low wages, or in precarious employment. So they're not in a situation where they can necessarily afford a more healthy diet in that sense. And so, rather than having a kind of a wide-ranging collective response to this obesity crisis, they're coming up with this kind of quick fix idea that benefits, surprise, surprise, some big pharma outfit that's getting, multi-hundreds of millions of pounds contracts paid for from the public purse. It's another scandal, isn't it, Bob?
Yes, it's huge. So, the reasons behind the obesity epidemic stem from the change in nutritional guidance back in the 70s. They started to demonize natural fats like butter and cheese. We were brainwashed that cholesterol is like the devil. And in its place came sugar and carbohydrates. Sugar and carbohydrates is a major driver of obesity, because sugar and carbohydrates, the body turns them into fat. And they're also highly addictive. They give your brain a dopamine hit. That means you feel full up for a very short period of time, and then you're craving the same sort of food again. So the food supply, the advice that was given, advertising, the deliberate engineering of these foods to be hyper palatable, and the supermarkets have these as a loss leader, and they pile it high, sell it cheap, and we are where we are now. And the benefits are, of course, to the drug companies, the food companies, obviously, and it's not harmful to the politicians to have a disconnected, sick, depressed, unengaged, and maybe mentally slowed down population, because it allows them to get away with more and more. Now, if you just look at, it's my perception, I haven't read any evidence on this, but my memory of people back in the 70s, where they were far more bolshy, and they knew when they were getting screwed, right?
Yeah.
But now everybody's quite passive and falls for these sort of identity politics, divide and rule tactics, and they fail to see what is driving a lot of this. They can't actually join the dots so easily. And unfortunately, we know that if your brain is lacking particularly certain amino acids and fatty acids, you can't think so well. And we also know that fasting actually improves your cognitive function. Throughout history and in the religions, when people wanted to think over a very complex problem or get closer to God, what did they do? They fasted. Right? And what the body does is turns your body fat stores into ketones, and ketones is a super fuel for the brain.
Right.
But if you constantly pump it full of sugar, you're not going to get the same results.
No, indeed. Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting.
We've got somebody who would like to speak, Chris. So patch that through. She's called Irene.
Oh, right, Irene. Yeah, I see that now. Yeah, come on, Irene. There's a song, isn't there? Like that. Come on, Irene. I wasn't meaning to be funny there. But yeah, what's your point, Irene?
And it was going back to Manchester, really, Andy Burnham. And there's a super report from the Centre for Policy Studies, the Conservative Research Group, a really excellent report, an old one by Carl Williams.
Oh, okay.
Carl with a K, interestingly enough. And I won't bore you, but what he says at that time, in spite of significant amounts of time and energy and money, creating new structures, the outcome is at best mixed and at worst negative.
Right.
And he urges that the whole system is stopped and halted until the negative effects of these rapid changes are corrected. But I don't think I've ever heard Andy Burnham mention that. And the actual report is Manchester greater?
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Any thoughts on that, Bob? Irene's comment there?
Yeah. So Manchester, I think, was one of the trailblazers in terms of this yet another reorganization. And the study she's referring to is that at huge sort of administrative cost, it's delivered no tangible benefit to patient care. And we see this time and time again. And this was Andy Burnham's baby in Greater Manchester. He was the face of this reorganization, but quietly this has been slipped out of public consciousness. So, if he does ever get anywhere near power again, he needs to be held to account for his atrocious record on what he's done to healthcare services in Manchester.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Interesting. Yeah. Well, thanks for that point, Irene. Appreciate that. But Chris,
I'm sorry.
Go on.
I'm sorry it was late. Oh, there's one other thing. I won't say it if it's inappropriate. It's about information collecting, data gathering by the NHS by stealth.
Indeed.
ID. I think this is. Bob will have some better things to say. I had an appointment. I had to change. Fine. And the letter told me to call a number. Reading the letter, it said, "We are not clinical. We are not anything. We are administrative. We're not related to anything clinical for your care at all." So I thought, oh, I won't bother ringing you. So then it said, you can change this appointment online. So I went to the government health online service, and that asked for digital ID, which I didn't want to do. So that were two aspects of a simple rescheduling of an appointment, both taking you to areas where you would give away information to agencies or in ways that you didn't want to. So then on the next letter, I actually rang the hospital direct and got through instantly and changed it with just a word. But if you weren't looking for those pitfalls or dangers, you could have easily fallen prey to that attempt to digitize you or for another agency to gain your information. That's it, really.
No,
Thank you.
Thanks, Irene.
Thanks for the show.
No, thanks, Irene. Appreciate that. Bob?
Yeah, I think, the NHS is a very easy target for this data collection, part of, assembling a mass surveillance, identities first type of a society. I came across, I forget the name of the Labour MP, he's supposedly on the left, but he was congratulating this ban for under 16-year-olds to have access to internet services. But what that means is that is yet another mechanism for having digital ID, because how do you prove whether you're over 16 or not? So the NHS, in order to access NHS, I expect in due course you will need a digital ID. So public services access to public services is a very easy mechanism for them to get this data, and they tried it with COVID, with the COVID passport. So the public need to be aware that the letters they get from the NHS may be coming from a third party. They've got the NHS logo on, and most people aren't as diligent and skeptical as Irene, and it will go over their heads, and they'll think, oh well, the NHS is running like this. But each time they introduce this digital barrier to access, you've got to think of it as a route of money out of the system, out of delivering care.
Yeah.
And the government never commissions and acquires anything at good value for money, in my experience. And Private Finance Initiative is a prime example. We never get good value for money. It's always, we're getting scammed left, right, and center. And, data mining is a huge potential resource for these private outfits.
No, indeed. I think we'll come back to that film that we're going to show, that video that we're going to play next week, Bob, because we're almost out of time. But yeah, I mean, I think the move towards the expansion of the private finance initiative, which was started obviously by John Major's Conservative government, was because of Gordon Brown's misplaced obsession with the so-called public sector borrowing requirement, which is a bit of a misnomer, really. I mean, they're talking about the sale of bonds. I mean, the governments don't really need to sell bonds. I mean, it's like a savings scheme rather than a borrowing scheme. You know, people want to acquire government bonds because they're a sort of cast iron safe bet, you know, a blue chip investment. And I mean, in some countries like Japan, I mean, bond yields have actually gone negative. So people are investing in these bonds and getting back less than they've actually paid for them, believe it or not. It's a kind of curious state of affairs. They've never gone negative in this country, but yeah, I mean, that was a disaster. I mean, a lot of people, of course, I mean, myself included, didn't really understand the monetary system the way in which I do today, and kind of I thought there might be some validity to this this nonsense about the so-called PSBR, public sector borrowing requirement. But, you know, we paid a heavy price for it. I mean, you know, Gordon Brown, people were saying, I mean, I remember even making the argument myself, Bob, well, you know, because of this concern about the PSBR, the thing is by going down the private finance initiative route, that doesn't show up in the PSBR. So it was a kind of bit of a kind of, you know, smoke and mirrors exercise to try and, you know, get some public investments into, or get some investments, should I say, into public services, by lining the pockets of the financial institutions. I mean, and I mean, God Almighty, talk about you know, bad value. I mean, we talked about earlier in the program about productivity, but I mean, you know, value for money is something else that they talk about. That was very, very poor value for money, wasn't it? The whole private finance initiative. My God, I mean, just talk about paying through the nose or something. Like, dear, oh dear, it's a shocking state of affairs, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, I find it hard to believe that people like Gordon Brown don't understand how finance works. We have an international economic system which is designed by and for the banks, the central banks. And you know, I was watching something the other day about the sort of lend-lease arrangements that America got in with the British Empire at the in the middle of the Second World War, and America stepped in with financial help only when they'd got every concession out of Churchill. Which was to allow the pound to collapse, remove those protectionist measures that the British Empire had to make sure the pound's value was inflated, and you know, they lent money at an extortionate interest, which I believe we only ended up paying off in 2006.
Yes, that's right.
So America's special relationship was based on screwing England and sucking all their assets out from beneath them. So if Gordon Brown doesn't understand that from history, then he should never have been anywhere near power.
No, absolutely, mate. Should be nowhere near it. I mean, he made some catastrophic errors. The only good thing, really, I think Gordon Brown did, you know, substance, really. I mean, you know, he would argue he did some work in relation to reducing child poverty. We shouldn't have any poverty in the sixth biggest economy in the world. But the only good thing he did was keep us out of the euro, keep us out of the eurozone. That would have been a disaster to lose control of your own currency. But we'll leave it there, Bob. Anyway, thanks for that again. Really interesting discussion. Thank you, everybody, for listening in and watching the show tonight. You know, we'll be back next week at the same time, all being well, and hopefully, Bob, you'll be free next Sunday as well. And we'll then show this again later in the week, a video version of this X Space, which will go out the following week. And if you want to watch us in multicolor, what day are we out on video, Chris? This show?
Wednesday.
Tuesday 9 p.m.
Tuesday 9 p.m. Yeah, great. Okay. Thanks very much indeed. That's it from me. Good night, and good night from Bob.